Well, hello there. Welcome to Biblical Chili. Now listen, the cruise is just about to start, but let me fill you in on a few details if you've never been here before. You see, we speak openly about the Bible and our daily walk with Christ, and it's our continuing prayer that we help you grow closer to Jesus every day. Now, you might be wondering why it's called Biblical Chili. You see, around this table we have people from all walks of life, different histories, backgrounds, different futures, even different religious views. But even with all these differences, that shouldn't hinder us from carrying on a conversation. And you stepped in at a good time too, because the Chili Crew is walking through the Bible from cover to cover. And right now, they're in the book of Exodus. Moses talking to a burning bush, plagues, Exodus out of slavery, and the Ten Commandments. Woo! This gives me the collywobbles just thinking about it. All right, today we're going to be continuing in Exodus chapter 22.
Starting with Exodus chapter 22, verse 1, King James Version. If a man should steal an ox or a sheep and kill it, or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox, and 4 sheep for a sheep.
Why is it more oxen? Why do you think it's more oxen than sheep? Wouldn't oxen be more expensive? Because aren't they bigger? I don't know. I haven't seen how.
Well, but he stole something of more value, so he'd have to recompense something of more value.
Yeah, but it's saying it's saying for 1 ox you have to pay back 5.
Right.
And then for 1 sheep you have to pay back 4.
Right. So it's like if you stole someone's house, you'd have to pay back the house plus all this acreage plus, it would have so much more value than if you stole a vase. If you stole a vase, you might just have to replace it with a vase and then a note saying you're sorry, But like, it's all kind of based on the value of what's being sold. And it's probably, it's like something's value times 5, So if something has more value, they're going to have to give more back to make up for it.
I almost wish we'd go to this type of system because this would be a huge deterrent for thievery. I mean, really, if you had to pay back even 4 times whatever the value was.
Right. I mean, honestly, it'll go on and give more about thievery and the protection of property, but
yeah, we can continue on. It just kind of struck me weird that the oxen is 5.
I don't think they had prison back then either.
No, they didn't. Like
we have prison
with God's justice system. There's no prison. But it's like, we see that in today's day. Like, what does that do for the criminal? We lock them up, but then they go out and they commit more crime. Whereas with this system, they had to work to pay off what they stole, or, they had to return to the victim, and it was a little bit more personal, which I'm sure actually helped the situation, instead of just.
And plus the fines that the criminals have to pay, it goes towards the government and not towards the victims.
Right.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah.
It goes straight to the victims and not the government. Or does it? We'll see. Continuing on. If a thief be found breaking up, and be smitten that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him. If the sun be risen up upon him, there shall be blood shed for him. For he should make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft.
Right.
That's that slavery that everybody keeps talking about.
Yeah, we kind of discussed the laws on servants and slavery the last time, and I thought it was really nice, although we did have to give that preface that a lot of times in Scripture when we're talking about slavery or servants, it's more like employment, because at least that's more like what God was trying to make it, because when the Israelites were in slavery and servitude to Egypt, they were not treated like employees. They were treated like absolute just filth of the earth, slavery and, abuse and that kind of things. And this is something that God wanted to stop. And this was just God's way. Like you said, Susanna, God's judicial system or God's law system. Can I say help the criminal? Because this kind of teaches them the lesson. Instead of just, like you said, just kind of putting them in a timeout, they actually have to work off their debt towards somebody.
If someone breaks in at night, that makes sense, because if someone breaks in your home at night and you can't see what they're doing, it's dark, so you're going to be thinking you might be defending your life. So therefore, what is that? Just cause, it's not murder. But if it happens during the day, you can see what they're doing. So if they're just stealing from you, that's not a cause for killing them. Therefore, you would be guilty. So, and then it would go by the normal laws of theft. So that's so fair.
God's trying to be fair here.
If the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or ass or sheep, he shall restore double. If a man shall cause a field or vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field, of the best of his own field, and of the best of his own vineyard, shall he make restitution. If fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of corn, or the standing corn, or in the field, be consumed therewith, he that kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. It sounds like in the olden days, we didn't need insurance companies to make sure we got our restitutions.
Right. Well, and you can see how all these systems we have today, I guess they work, but they're a business, and it's the business that's ultimately going to be profiting off of it. Insurance companies make tons of money. We pay them, and then they kind of help us sometimes, and like with the government, we pay them, but all this money for crime goes to them. Whereas with this, you take the middleman out and you just have to deal. Of course, it's easier maybe because it wasn't just money, they actually had cows and had animals, so they bartered and, worked things out a little differently. I don't know how that would look today, but
I have a feeling we're going to find out in the next couple of years.
Oh, no. If we go back to the bartering system, guys, I'm lost.
Yeah, me too. I'm just now trying to set up a garden.
I do hair for my house, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, you can bring me a dozen eggs for your haircut. That's fine.
Yeah, I'll be right over.
Right. You're cheating, man.
My beard could use a trim.
I work with somebody he's got like the perfect shaped head for a bald head, and so he shaves his head a lot. I wish I had his head, and I tell him that all the time because I'm like, I got an weird egg shaped head when it's shaved. So.
All bald head looks fine as long as you got a goatee.
Come on.
Anyway, if a man, number 7 is where we're at. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges, to see whether he have put his hand unto the neighbor's goods.
So is this borrowing, or is this like, hey, Susanna, I brought over my lawnmower because I'm building a barn and I need it stored somewhere? Is it like I'm giving it to you to hold on to for me? Or is it you borrowed it? Or is it just one and the same? It almost sounds like it's both. Like if you just have somebody else's property that's not yours, and you're taking responsibility for it.
I think it's circumstantial, but I can see definitely, like, take for example the loaning. If you loan somebody something and it's in your heart that you never return it, that is actually theft.
What if I just forget? Because I'm really bad at forgetting.
That's a different thing. Yeah, I would think that they have a honor roll system or like a reminding system. Like, hey, you still got that?
Right, but this sounds like it's holding the borrower, or the he's holding the person who's holding on to it responsible for that item. If it's stolen.
I would think so. If you have a contract, even verbally, like, hey, can you take care of this for me? And then something bad happens to it, it's in your possession.
I don't know. Just to me, this whole thing, that whole, like, verse 7 to verse 8 seems really obscure. I mean, unless it was a common thing back then.
I mean, I'm not really confused about it.
I'm not confused by it. It seems, I don't know, it just seems.
Well, this is what I'm always talking about when I say that God does not leave a lot of life out.
No.
Like, it's like, where are the gray areas? Like, I can't.
He's having having a hard time finding them.
Where this would happen, but I'm sure it's happened. And God's like, well, if this happens, here are some guidelines with how to deal with it.
It happens in the military all the time. People go on deployments. Hey, can you take care of this for me? And stuff things just happen. You see it.
Right.
I've seen it. So
right. So yeah, it seems really weird to like me. I'm like, I don't know why I would just give my neighbor money or an animal or whatever, but apparently it's a thing somewhere.
But I was talking about the loan things when he said there's a difference between, hey, can you take care of this, and a loan, whether it's be money or an ox
or loaning them, loaning them a lawnmower or something.
Yeah, I mean, I have my neighbor's skunk traps. I've had them for a couple months, and he said you can hold on to them for as long as you like. I have every intent on returning those, but I've had them for a few months now. Am I guilty of theft? No. Right. He knows where they're at.
Right.
He hasn't asked for them. Now, if he asked for them and I say, oh, I don't have them anymore and I still got them, well, then I lied and I attempt theft.
Right. But now if you were to like break those, you probably would feel like you should replace them for your neighbor, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right. So it's like he entrusted me with these. I was using them. I broke them. The right thing to do would be to offer to replace them for him when you give them back.
Plus, it's just mutual respect, the
right.
golden rule from treat others how you would like to be treated. It's in the Bible. Same thing with people's things. Inanimate objects are exactly that. If something breaks, then oh well. But at the same time, be respectful and be like, hey, I broke this. I'm going to replace it for you. Here's something that might be even better.
Right, I'm pretty sure in here somewhere there is one where it says if you borrow your neighbor's clay pot and you break it.
Yeah, I remember reading something about that.
Yeah, so it's like so many of these things. And when people are like, oh, none of that stuff is important anymore, that's all been done away with. I'm like, most of this stuff is just like common courtesy, like how we should treat people. Like, you really don't think if you break someone's thing, you should replace it.
Maybe that's why I'm a little baffled by it. Like, I'm not confused because it makes sense, but maybe that's why I'm kind of baffled by it, because it's something that should be common courtesy.
Where are we at?
I think we're at 9.
9? Okay. For all manner of trespass, whether it be for ox, for ass, for sheep, for raiment, or for any manner of lost thing which another challengeth to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whom the judges shall condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. Ass means donkey. It's a donkey.
My version is PG, and they just say donkey.
Yeah, mine says donkey.
If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, and it die or be hurt or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand unto his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good. That was a long one.
Oh, so there's allowed to be accidents, It's like, oh, well, it just got away. It's not the person's fault, so the person isn't held accountable.
I think both of them has to agree this, don't they?
Yeah, right. I mean, all of this, these are judicial, this is a judicial system. So it's like, yes, they might even take it to the judges and be like, well, this is what happened and this is what happened. And then they have to come to an agreement,
That's what I was going to say is several times so far it says, obviously if it's these weird situations that there's multiple parties involved, it sounds like when you get into something like that, that's not, black and white, absolutely clear, then just bring it before the judges. You tell your story, you tell yours, and let the judges decide.
Right, but it's not even like you have to. It's like today, if you get in a car accident and there's a tiny scratch on someone's car, and they might be like, "Oh, I don't care. We don't have to get the police involved.
Right,
it's not
exactly.
a big deal." Or it's like someone might be like, "Well, can I pay you? Can I do something?" Like that's something you could work out amongst yourselves. But depending on the people or depending on the situation, they might be like, "No, we have to get someone else involved." So it's kind of open ended.
So let me ask this question. Too. I mean, I know we're not but halfway through this. This would, if we could apply some modern context to this, How would you guys feel, or maybe rate or situationally discuss Christians suing other people, or like you just said, somebody bumping into somebody's car, damaging somebody else's car, etc.? How should they react in a situation like that? And I don't get too specific, but just how should we, in that situation, if we can go general, how should we present ourselves and act in that type of situation?
Well, I think that, God is a God of justice. So I don't think we should necessarily just shrug everything back. Oh, you were texting and hit my car. It's fine. Just go on. Like,
obviously it's situational. I know this is kind of a loaded question. So
yeah, I think you could, but I don't think that it would be outside of God's character or outside of us to be taking on his character to say justice needs to, come with what you've done. And I think that's kind of where Jesus talks about, the law says if someone punches you, you can punch them back. But Christ is like, well, or you could turn the other cheek, So it's like, I feel like it is all situational, and just knowing God better, knowing, what he would do in these situations better, because there's times with us that he shows us mercy. We might not face the consequences of our actions because he's merciful, but then in other situations, it's not merciful to let someone not face the judgment.
Yeah,
if you
not
let
be held
someone
accountable.
Yeah, if you let someone get away with it over and over again, you're that's not loving. You're not helping them.
Right. That may not be doing that person any favors. That's right.
So I think it's just, it really just comes down to knowing God and trying to be like him and be like, is this a situation where mercy needs to be shown to love this person, to lead them closer to you? Or is this a situation where they need to face a consequence and they need to experience the wrath, because there needs to be a balance of mercy and wrath, otherwise we'll all just be destroyed, it has to be there.
Here's a prime example. I have a family whom I love very dearly, and they're a family friend of the family. You know what I mean? Like when I was younger, this family was, we hung out a lot, and we were all, because their kids were all our age and we were all their age, that kind of thing. And short version is one of their daughters, Gracie, unfortunately, she died from a medical malpractice. She was only like 8 or 7. Like she was very young. And very sad situation. I mean, it was just a bad situation all around. But the punchline of the story is that the family was a good Christian family, but they ended up suing the hospital. But the thing is in the end, they got like, a $3.7 million settlement or something like that. And the money ended up changing the family, like in a very bad way. Now, mind you, I love them very, very dearly still to this day, and it wasn't every family member of the family, but needless to say, the whole family was broken to pieces because now they sued a hospital, and now they're filthy stinking rich, but they, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things, like you don't know, you didn't experience to get the money, so it actually hurt the family by trying to do that. Now, I'm not advocating that doctors should not be held accountable for malpractice. That's not my point, because she was very young and she should not have died, period. But, nonetheless, it's a bad situation. But okay, we I guess we can keep going. Are we on 12?
Yes. And if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn. And if a man borrow aught of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, the owner thereof being not with it, he shall surely make it good. But if the owner thereof be with it, he shall not make it good. If it be an hired thing, it came for his hire.
See, and I think that simplifies the whole thing. You should make it good. I think simplifies this whole thing. If we all come to each other and make it right, then a lot of this kind of goes away. I mean, would you agree? I'm not saying negating what God's saying here. What I'm saying is I think that sums it up in in one pretty package we can hand somebody, make it good if you've offended in this manner.
Right. Well, and like, here's where it kind of shifts gears moving on. But it's like right now, so far, we've been going over, if this happens, this is how you deal with it. So it's like, these are things that will happen even among God's people who are, supposed to be acting like him and like are supposed to be learning and his royal priesthood nation. Like, these are things that will happen, but all of the consequences, they kind of benefit both parties. There's something happens and then there's a consequence. The victim has restitution made to them. The person who committed the crime hopefully grows from that experience. Like, it's all for the better. So it's like, even if you committed these wrongs, you can still get past it and it's not held against you anymore. You've paid it back. Overall, you might move forward to be a great member of society. But then, like, we're going to go into moral. It's not so much like, if this does this and this happens. It's like, if this does this, like, this is not acceptable at all among God's people. And you're probably going to be cut off or killed. Like, we're kind of getting into some more serious, like, moral stuff coming up, I think. So.
And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins.
Right. Yours says maiden. My verse says entices a virgin. I like yours.
Yeah.
I like yours way better. A maiden. It makes it seem so like knight in shining armor, like a maiden.
Oh, my fellow maiden.
Yeah, right. So okay, so entices. Is this just talking about like wooing a young girl to do stuff that they probably shouldn't be doing together? I'm guessing.
There's like seduction there, and it doesn't mention anything that's not against your will or anything yet, I should say. And honestly, I would think in today's terminology, this would go both ways. I mean, obviously, there's no virgin debt anymore, at least in the United States of America. I
not
can't
from
speak
a legal
for other countries,
stance, at least.
Yes. And but however, there used to be a time where parents did teach virginity as a special thing. It's not taught like that today.
And this ultimately, protects the family and it protects the woman. So it's like, if he seduces her and lies with her, they're basically saying she's likely pregnant, so it's like, you can't just then walk away from her. You have a responsibility because now she's likely could be pregnant and have a baby and she's not a virgin anymore. So it's like, you can't just ruin her life and leave her. You have to at least offer to take her as your wife. You can't just be sleeping around, spreading your seed everywhere. You have to take responsibility for that.
And that's a really good
virgins
point.
Are worth more than non-virgins. That just means that she was divorced usually.
Right.
And that's a great point, because that verse 17, it says, if her father utterly refuses, but imagine if the father refused the marriage. Okay, let's just say the father refused it. The father himself, in part, would be responsible for her livelihood afterward also. Because imagine, like you guys, piggybacking off what you guys just said, she's no longer a virgin. She's no longer an available maiden. She's a woman who's been violated, who now has a child. So whoever marries into her will be marrying into that situation. You know what I mean?
So if someone else comes along and, they want to marry her, it sounds so terrible to say like, oh, she's not like worth as much, but it's like, to the family, she has a kid now she has to take care of likely. Right. So she's not as useful in helping the family farm because she's mothering her kid. Mm-hmm. And she might not be as useful helping out in the family she's marrying into because she has that other responsibility. So it's just like, it's that protection. So they're saying either way, even if, like, let's say this guy is a jerk and the dad's like, there's no way I'm letting her marry you, but you still have to be responsible. It's almost like what do we do now? Like, dads have to pay
It's not alimony, it's child support?
Child support, yeah. So it's like you still made an impact on her life where it's never going to be the same. So you still have to be responsible for that. Even if, you're not getting married, and he has to pay it either way.
Yeah, he has to pay that price either way. Yeah.
And kind of, I've been trying to figure out how to say this politely. They did not have preventive pregnancy measures back then. They didn't have, most likely, when they did their thing, they did their thing. They didn't do it there's an example in the Bible where it talks about where these men kept marrying this one lady. They would die because they would spread their seed somewhere else after they laid with her. So according to their customs, they're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to spread their seed somewhere else because they would die. And so with that being said, like you said, there was a possibility that after being seduced and being laid with without even being engaged or married or whatever, she was most likely pregnant that night.
Right. Or she wasn't pregnant and then someone might not want to marry her because they might think she couldn't have kids. So it's kind of a lose-lose.
Yeah,
right?
Either way, it's impacted her life in a negative way.
Yeah. Or maybe she loves him and she wants to marry him and her father doesn't think he's a jerk and then they get married and it's fine.
Okay, now we're going to be getting into some heavy stuff. Let me read 18. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Some of them actually say witch. I know there are some versions that say you shall not permit a witch to live. Now, I do have a question on this. Why is it that witchcraft, sorcery, magics in general in Scripture were always... How can I put this? They were not just not permitted or taboo, like in some cultures. They're just absolutely downright... You throw them out of the camp, you have to stone them, you have to get rid of them. Why is it that God was so adamant about magics and sorcery and summoning spirits and familiars and that kind of stuff? Why?
Because he knew how fake it was and how dangerous it was to believe in such things.
Well, I mean, they're not even believing in it. They're actually practicing it. So, like, we're talking about people who are engaging.
If you allow a virus to stay in your body and not get rid of it, that virus will eventually take over your entire body and destroy you. Believing in falsities does exactly that within any culture. It affects it. And there's a lot of things that exist today that many people believe that are false. And let's face it, no matter what we believe, unless God says it's true, it's not true. Unless God says it is true, it is not true. So there's a lot of things that even I believe today are probably false. There's the fact is that my shortness of this is that there's only one truth and everything else is a lie. Whether we believe it to be truth or not. Unless God says it is truth, it's a lie. So I know I looked into this years ago, and I was a mid to late teenager, because I thought, why a witch to live? Now, do you guys know anything about the practice of Wicca? Yes.
Maybe a little bit. Good. Okay. So those who are listening, Wicca is I guess I could say a religious group, a group that believes, like, Wicca is a very actually loose religious faith system, but they do practice magics and different forms of magics and summonings and that kind of stuff. Okay, and I know that sounds all hokey, ha ha ha, yeah, right. No, I actually had several of my very close friends that were Wiccans, and I love them very dearly, but the fact is, and this is just my opinion, but after studying this out myself, because I wanted to know why in the Bible was witchcraft and sorcery and these type of things and summoning of spirits and whatnot, why was it so heavy? And through my study, I found out that sorcery was, and witchcraft was frowned upon, because when it comes to all of those types of practices, you are engaging with, talking to, summoning, communicating with, relationship with demons.
Mm-hmm.
And because the demonic realm, Satan's angels, I'll just say that Satan's angels are trying to deceive the world, and when people engaged in these things, they let and even requested these demons to be brought in. And at this time, especially this time in the camp, they're in very close quarters. They're in a camp, and they could not accommodate somebody practicing such things, especially because they would be worshiping they would basically be worshiping the enemy, if I can put it that way. Like here, there's only two sides here. It is selfishness and Satan's side, and then it's God's side. Like those are the only two sides.
Right.
And I think that is why, I've heard this so many times. Why were they so hard on witches, especially from my Wiccan friends? Why, the Bible says this about witches, and Christians are just after to kill witches. Well, no, that wasn't the point. Okay, I understand that, but I understand what you're getting at, but that wasn't the point. It was the fact that you're worshiping and you're communicating with something that could inevitably lead to something much deeper, which is, into idolatry and basically violating every one of the 10 Commandments. What, 2 chapters ago that God just gave?
With a lot of these, they shall be put to death sort of laws. Even that, in a sense, like when we're born, we're all basically walking dead, right? Like you have to be resurrected in this life, like let's say, like in Ephesians, it talks about how we were dead once. We were separated from Christ. We were separated from God. Yep. And then we died with Christ, and now we're resurrected. Like, and there's verses that say, a seed has to die before it can be born. So spiritually, we're all dead already, and you have to turn towards God and submit to him and come alive. So when you're spiritually dead, for all practical purposes, you're just dead, like you're not physically dead, but you really are. Like you're just. Well,
the scripture even says that Jesus Christ is the life. Like it doesn't just say that like serendipitously. It means that he is the one that gives life.
Right. So if you're walking and if you're turning towards that stuff that's bringing you spiritual death, it is almost these people could go on and get into even darker stuff and worse stuff, and they could spread it through their whole camp.
And that's the thing, is it's a hard thing no matter what, because it sounds so harsh in the society we live in today. It's very anti capital punishment. Now, I'm not saying capital punishment is let's all just go back to capital punishment and killing everybody. Well, no, everybody needs a chance, right? But the thing is what we're talking about here, and especially in this situation, putting ourselves into this scenario, we're talking about number one, a people that God has chosen. Number two, those people chose God. Number three, God laid down not just these 10 commandments. Like, we got to understand, through Israel, God was going to bring salvation. We're not talking about just some people that happen to worship God. We're not talking about the world we live in today, which is you can choose whatever religion you want to, and there's no real impact to the world around you in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about God specifically, like this is the train that God is going to deliver his salvation to. This is the vehicle.
Well, and I think you made a really good point when you said that these are also a people who chose God. So when he gives out these commandments, and what do they say? They say, okay, whatever you say, we'll do.
Up to this point, how many times have they said that?
Right.
Like probably a dozen times up to this point.
Yeah. So they're saying, okay, we're gonna follow you. We're gonna be obedient. These aren't just people who are pagan societies who are practicing witchcraft and don't know better. These are people who are learning, and they've committed and said, I'm going to do this. So it's like, what a slap in the face to God, when he's done all these amazing things for you. He led you through the wilderness and your sandals didn't even wear out, and he rescued you, and he's giving you these guidelines both to live. And you said, you made a commitment that you were going to do it. And then you fall away. In Hebrews, that says that, for those that are continually sinning, even with knowing the knowledge, like they have the knowledge of the truth and they understand what Jesus did for them. Like there's no sacrifice for that sin anymore. So like there's a difference between you're doing something because you're ignorant, or you're doing something and because it was like a mistake. But if you're just willfully committing witchcraft or willfully doing these things, there's no sacrifice for that. So again, you're dead already.
And you know something, back then, I think almost every country practiced some kind of witchcraft. And this kind of gets on a tangent that God wanted his people to be different for a reason. He wanted his people to be different so that the nations around Israel will know that he is God. I mean, think about it. If Israel practiced witchcraft, not only would they have false gods amongst their midst, but as well as demons, and the other nations will be able to say, "Oh, their sorcerers did that. There was no God. It was their sorcerers."
Oh, that's a good point.
No, it was their witches.
Oh.
They resurrected people. That's how they got more people in their army.
Wow.
That's how they were defeated. That's why they were so invincible. They were zombies already. They couldn't die.
Right. Well, and not even just mentioned like back then. I mean, even now, like as Justin said, he knows people who practice Wiccan religion. I lived in a city for years where witchcraft was very prevalent. It was a very big part of that town, and it was way more mainstream and with people who utterly believed it and followed it as a religion than you could imagine. Like, so it's the same today. I don't think it's any different. And if you were to go into a church and see them doing weird Wiccan things, like that would be not okay. It's like, you guys are not acting. You're not God's people. It's wrong.
If I may capstone this with a verse, the whole witchcraft thing with a verse. In 1 Samuel 15:23, and I think this is the reason why God is so adamant against it, outside of the fact that when it comes to many sorceries and witchcraft, I'm sorry, you're worshiping devils and you're allowing demons into your life, okay? If we can just say it like that. Let's rip the whole veil off, okay? So 1 Samuel 15:23 states, "For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." So this is obviously talking about a story in the situation, but God literally compares witchcraft to rebellion. It's a 1-to-1. Witchcraft is the sin of rebellion, and I think that's why God is so... It's like iron-fisted against it, because you are literally worshiping the enemy of his soul.
It's very idolatry as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's completely idolatry.
This next one in verse 19, this may get a little bit past PG, and hopefully we don't stay on it too long. "Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death." I think... if I can sum it up, unless you guys have more, I think it's because of disease spreading, and not just disease spreading, but it's, sexual sins and disease spreading and just...
In Leviticus, there's this whole section that's pretty much talking about holiness. And it's saying, you are to be a holy set apart people to me. So, it talks about 3 main things. It talks about all of these sexual immorality laws, things like bestiality. It talks about idolatry laws, but things like setting up strange fires, doing, different rituals, things like that. And then it talks about clean and unclean animals. And it talks about this is what's food and this is what's not food. And when you look at all of these things that all describe what it means to be holy, it's understanding God and his creation, and that he made everything for a purpose. And he wanted Israel for a purpose, right? So he gave animals, he gave us certain body parts and certain things to do certain things. So if you're using them according to the purpose that God created them for, that is what holiness means.
Right.
So,
no, absolutely.
Like if you're starting a campfire, that's not idolatry, because you're using it according to its purpose, right? You're burning leaves and you're
staying warm.
Yeah, if you're doing, you're staying warm, you're cooking food, But if you're having a weird ritual, then it's idolatry, because you're using it not according to its purpose.
Yeah.
This is just like the first blurb of that, saying that.
That's a really easy way to put it, and I like how simplified that is. It's if you're not using it according to the way that God created it. Okay, let's continue on then. Verse 20. He who sacrifices to any god except to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. Now, I do have a caveat here when it comes to utterly destroyed. Utterly destroyed does not necessarily mean put to death in this instance, because it said put to death but before that. But utterly destroyed can mean a lot of things. Like a lot of times it means like cast out, ostracized, forced out, pushed out. It can mean death. So I won't discount that by any stretch of the imagination. So continuing on, verse 21. You shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And this is good. God reminds us of them many, many times. This is not the first time this has come up where he said you were a stranger or you were a slave in the land of Egypt. 22, you shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry. Verse 24, and my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. I find this telling about God's character big time. He places in the highest regard those who need help, those who need protection, and especially those who can't defend themselves in many ways. 25. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, you shall not be like a moneylender to them. You shall not charge him interest. If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For that is his only covering. It is the garment for his skin. What will he sleep in? And it will be that when he cries to me, I will hear, for I am gracious. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. Ooh!
In this verse, which we actually see this quoted in Acts, so we can, I don't think they're saying at all, don't curse God. They're saying, don't curse the spiritual being people among you, the leaders, the rulers. Of course, by doing that, you would be cursing God. But in Acts 23, there's that whole situation where Paul's on trial and he's saying, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day. So he's talking about how he's up to this day, he's followed God's commandments and done all the things, he's in good conscience. But then Ananias, the high priest, goes to strike him, and Paul gets all sassy because he doesn't realize that he's the high priest. So he's like, oh, you would strike me. And he, kind of fights him. He's like, God's going to strike you down for this. Those who stood by were like, would you revile God's high priest? Because they're bringing up this law. And Paul says, oh, I didn't know that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. So he's quoting Exodus. So he's saying, I wouldn't have said that had I known you were the high priest, because he still follows all these commandments, And
the interesting thing about this also is, and especially in today's culture, is we have a very, I'll just say, politically charged culture in the last 2 years, if I can say that.
Yeah.
And it's very common, and I'm sure you guys have seen the signs and flags and everything else all around. I'm not going to quote what they say, but the fact is we are cursing our leaders, one in particular, and talking bad about them. But the thing is I think God is also saying this. This is like a double-edged sword here. It's not just you cursing a ruler for the sake of cursing a ruler, and now, you're cursing them, and that's bad. There's also other things. If you talk ill of rulers, all that does is create animosity in the country. All that does is create animosity and hatred in the the country, the people, the group, whatever it is. And I mean, even if you're speaking ill of managers in a store you work at, all it does is create hatred for that person. And then all you inevitably end up getting is just this hodgepodge of confusion and frustration and hatred. Instead of trying to work together and, find solutions, all we're doing is just creating more and more strife for ourselves. I'm just saying it's a double-edged sword. It's not just, well, God said not to do it, so don't do it because it's a bad thing. But there's also another thing. God knows it's bad for you to do it. Like, it ruins your personality, it ruins your character and other people around you as well. So, all right, let's keep going. We only have a few more verses left. Verse 29, you shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe produce and your juices. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Likewise, you shall do with your oxen and your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days. On the 8th day, you shall give it to me. Verse 31, and you shall be holy men to me. You shall not eat meat torn by beasts in the field. Don't eat roadkill. You shall throw it to the dogs. Yeah, so that literally says don't eat roadkill.
Well, there goes the Beverly Hillbillies.
Right, I guess so. No possum stew.
Yeah.
Now, these are good, guys. I mean, many of us kind of gloss over this. We kind of talked about this before we even started a little bit about why is it that most people don't know about all of these things post Ten Commandments. Like, most people, they know the story up to the Ten Commandments, and then they know that little blip, which we're going to get to eventually, where they sin against God. But nobody remembers reading these things about God teaching Israel in the Old Testament about mercy and grace and loving others and treating people fairly. And like Susanna was summed up so beautifully, that make it right, make it good. To quote scripture, it says here, he shall surely make it good. Speaking about with your neighbor, we kind of gloss over these things, but we don't realize Jesus taught these things. Jesus got them, guess what? From Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, it's a beautiful thing about God's mercy and grace. And I think that's awesome, Susanna, that you said that.
I feel like when I was younger, I was always like, I'm going to read through the Bible, and I would do really, really well until I hit about, here.
And then it's like.
But then I think it's that mindset that we're kind of taught that this isn't really that important anymore. There's, this was then,
everything
and then
was,
there's grace and mercy
cross,
now.
Don't worry about it anymore.
But then someone told me how, they pointed out that this is how we see God's character. And now it's just my favorite parts of the Bible to read, because I can see, how much it shows us about God and how, like you said, Justin, how loving he is and how merciful and how, grace, and how, even when there is wrath, you see the importance of that balance, and how sometimes there's consequences and sometimes there's not consequences. And, it's all so rich and good.
And the end of Exodus 22, ladies and gentlemen. All right, and I guess I'll close out unless you guys have a last word. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We were given to dive deeply into your word and to really pick apart Exodus 22 and some of these more specifics you've given us and given Israel, Father. I pray, Lord, that you'll please help us all to take this to heart. Help us to examine our hearts, Father, as this day continues on. And Lord, the next time we open your word and come together to do this, I pray you'll send your Holy Spirit to guide us once again through your word. We love you so much, and we thank you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, this has been Justin.
This has been Antonio.
And this is Susanna.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We will see you next time.
Now listen, just because this is the end of the episode doesn't mean it's the end of the conversation. You can find Biblical Chili on almost any social media outlet. And if you're not a big fan of YouTube, just search for Biblical Chili anywhere and I'm sure you'll be able to find us. Or just go to biblicalchili.com. Now until we meet again, remember, be part of the conversation. Goodbye.
Well, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on here. Premarital stuff.
So we try to keep it PG. So.
Exactly. Premarital stuff.
Do you think they're still listening? I doubt it. There can't be that many people that listened all the way to the end of the track. Most will probably skip it. But in case you did, congratulations. You're one of the few. We love you.